guys want to talk, I'll be here for as long as you guys want to talk. And again, a big thanks out to Strictly Sail and Brian and all the Tacy's for hosting this and doing all this work so we can have a nice place to sit and enjoy the seminar.
I like that already.
Yeah, big rod man. Right there, that was a good fish.
That was a
man.
big rod man
That was
right
a really
there.
good fish right there. And notice how this is actually a little earlier in the year, and I'll get behind the story behind it. But this is, I'm only in like a foot of water here, and that's only like 6 inches of water. So
Real?
Yeah.
Oh,
So really the first thing we got to talk about before we go any farther, since we're talking about fall winter fishing, is safety. Because quite frankly, as soon as the temperature drops, we're right at the cusp of it being like very dangerous to be in the water. Like if you fall in now, you're probably just going to be really sorry you fell in, but in another week or two, you're going to be in a life-threatening situation, especially if you fish by yourself. You really want to be in a dry suit with a PFD that's non-inflatable as the temperature goes down, so you don't have to worry about pulling a cord. And quite frankly, inflatable PFDs, as much as I like them, don't work that great in the wintertime. As Bert was saying, everyone probably heard that they don't totally inflate when it's cold. So always wear your life vest, no matter what. Bring up back up warm-up clothes and a dry bag, so you can change your clothes, your whole outfit. Because if you get just a little wet and you got to go 6 miles back to where you launched, you're going to be in a lot of hurt for it, and a lot of trouble. You know, what I also add to my warm clothes is I bring fire starting stuff. I've never had to use it, but you know, as long as I have it, I will never have to use it. Another thing you want to keep in mind is having the right tools for the job. And what I mean by that is the right safety gear, starting back at the safety gear, a good kayak, the right rods, the right reels. It's, you know, these fish are strong fish. So if you come out there with 6-pound line, you're going to be in trouble. 8-pound line, you're going to be in trouble. That's not what the gear you want to use. You really want to up your gear weight. You know, the minimum I use is 12-pound weight line for these fish. I have used lighter, but you're going to lose a lot of fish. I mean, they're super, super strong. And so right now, the biggest question I've gotten today is, what's happening right now? So right now, you really want to go to the creek mouths and tributary mouths. Up deep tributaries that have flowing water coming out of it. That's what's happening right now. That's where the fish are stacking up. You also find them, we're in a kind of a weird phase because normally the Ohio River's a lot higher than it is right now. So the fish are also roaming around on the Ohio River. So you can find them in other creek channels that aren't flowing water. You can find them in other cuts. Any place you find shad right now. So basically any type of little still water area, you're going to find them. And you'll find them shallow or deep this time of year. Everyone's asked me that today. So one of the other things I like about fishing in the river is the multi-species you run into. I mean, here's a saw guy that you can run into that was right in the mix with the hybrids. This time of year, this water temp. This is last year though. I haven't run into any of these this year on the river, but that's just an example of one of the other species you can catch on the river. So the beginning of fall, the water's going to be like 70 degrees. And we're coming off the summer temperatures, so the fish are going to congregate more around oxygenated water, and that's where they're all going to be. So they're going to be at dams, they're going to be at tributaries, up in the tributaries when I say that, like up, way up the tributaries, up at the first riffle, up at the second riffle, up at the third riffle. They're still going to be in the riffles at this time because they need that oxygenated water, because even though it's 70 degrees, not today, but let's just say right now the water was 70 degrees. Just a week ago, it would have been 80 degrees, you know, really hot, you know, and then the week before that, 90 degrees. So, I mean, this year I saw some of the highest water temps I've seen in tributaries ever, as long as I've been fishing. So, my favorite baits for the 70-degree water temps is large lipless crankbaits and big, really big shad-style swim baits. When I say big, I mean like, if you can find a 12-inch one, run that. Yeah, when the water's that warm, yeah. Because they'll come at it. They'll come after giant stuff when the water's that warm. You know, and that's the deal with these fish too, is that they know this is the beginning of the time that they know they can feed up. So this is the beginning of their most aggressive time that I find to right when it starts hitting 70 degrees. And also what I found that time of year, there are basically two places. Oxygenated water or super deep. I was talking about this with a few of you guys. That the water, like on the Ohio River, I was finding them at 35 feet deep, 30 feet deep, you know, and what they were doing, they were on the outside of these bends, sweeping bends in Ohio. And on my fish finder, you can see this in one particular area, this giant hump that came up that made this huge current break. The current's sweeping over just the outside bend, and they were all stacked up behind it, out of the current. And I watched it grow from a small school that it went almost 2 miles long. Really, really hard to target when they're that deep because one, they don't want to bite because they're really deep and they're hunkering down. Two, they were under a lot of current. I did catch them throughout the whole 2 miles. It was really kind of a hard bite. It wasn't like a fun fishing bite. But that's where they were there. And when you find them schooled up like that big, and that many of them, you know that the creeks and tributaries around there are going to be hot spots, right? I mean, you just know that that's because they're stacking up, and they're not going to go 20 or 30 miles from there. They might go 6, they might go 10 for the rest of the season, but I don't want to say they don't, but the majority of them don't, you know? And this is one of the ways that I find out which tributaries to target is by finding those big schools in the late summer, early fall. I'm not even necessarily fishing them hard. I just want to know where they are so I know which tributaries to key in on as the fall comes up. And that's been, for the last 3 years, that's how I've been locating all my fish and finding my really solid patterns. So as the water keeps dropping in temperature, they're going to move to deeper pools and riffles adjacent to these riffles and where they're going to come up and start feeding. And as soon as that water temperature drops to the 60, 50 degree range, that big giant school is now, I just went over 2 days ago, is now like very, very few, very, very small. There is no more 2 mile school. There's no 1 mile school. There was hardly any fish there because they've broken off and moved off in smaller packs as the water cooled down. Now they're being super active again. And in my opinion, the 60 to 50 degree range is the best time to target these fish. They're the most aggressive, I find. They're the easiest to target because they're starting to come up shallow, right? They're coming out of the riffles. They're starting to move down the tributaries towards the creek mouth, so we're getting more and more fish in one spot to target. And like I mentioned earlier, the flooding that we normally have that's not happening right now can help position the fish. So a lot of people kind of complain about when the river blows out, it goes up 8 feet, 10 feet and gets muddy. That's really a good thing. That's not a bad thing, because that's pushing the fish out of the current of the Ohio River and more towards those creek beds, right? Now, is it going to be harder to target them if it's milkshake? Yes, but that's why you want to use like a lipless crankbait or some type of hard bait that's putting off a lot of vibration in the water, so they can not have to see it. They can use their lateral line to catch it. And that's really about the only bait that I'm throwing right now is the lipless crankbait. I mean, I can't put it down because it's just not productive. Swim baits have been okay, but really for me, the lipless crankbait is the best one. So as we approach 50 degrees in the Ohio River, the tributaries will be cooling down much quicker because our nights are 20 degrees, our days are barely breaking 40 degrees. So the tributaries are going to cool way down way quicker. So when the Ohio's running 50 and tributaries running 40, that can give you a big clue on where they're going to be, is that they're going to be at that line between the hot and the cold water, right? Because all the bait fish, all the minnows, all the shad are very susceptible and very sensitive to temperature change, and they want to go towards the warmer water. And that's what they all do. All the shad move down, and really the hybrids are just following the food. These fish, a lot of people call them predictably unpredictable, but really they are. They live their lives off their stomachs. They're just chasing shad. Until springtime comes, that's the only thing they care about. They just want to eat. You know, they're not really concerned about much else. And you know, as the water temperature cools down, I just downsize my flipless crankbaits to 1/4 ounce. I start downsizing my swim baits. So, and here's a typical example of what a hybrid will do to a crankbait. Literally pulled it and broke it. So, not that we're under these conditions right now, but when the river is blown out and you're getting all this current coming down, so the Ohio's running much faster than what it is right now. It'll be running maybe as much as 5 miles an hour, so it's a pretty stiff current will be coming down. As that current comes down and goes past the tributaries, some of that current's gonna come in and it's gonna hit right here, right? You see that arrow point right there? Current's gonna hit that and it's gonna kind of split, right? And you'll see like a bubbling action, kind of like it's pushing up right there. Well, when the water's really blown out and there's debris in it and stuff, and I can't really fish out here, a lot of times those hybrids aren't out there either. They pull in to the structure, they're pulling into where it's easy to get food. They're pulling in really, really tight to structure right on this wall right here. And I'll throw a bass lure. I'll throw a Texas TRD, big TRD, and I think they call it their lightning or silver or something. I got a white one and then their one that's deal color where it's green and white. I'll throw those on here, Texas rig style, like you're fishing for bass. Right up to the bank, I'll pull it down. And this is where I've got some of my best fish when the water's high. Because those bigger fish, they're coming up, getting really close to that wall, and they're just waiting for something to come over that they can eat without getting bombarded by a log that's rolling down the river at 5 miles an hour, the sticks and all the leaves and all the other garbage that's getting blown down the river. So they'll just stick up to that wall real tight. And you're bass fishing. You're throwing bass lures in there, pulling it off the wall and just letting the current kind of drag it down and tick it. But I use really light stuff too, like 1/4 ounce. I'll use a 3/0 hook, offset hook for that. And that is one of the ways, I don't see a lot of people, I haven't seen anyone fish that way for that matter. And that was high water, really good high water lure. So this is exactly what I was talking about earlier, about the fish being down deep. These are the fish piled up, down deep, and you can barely make them out in down scan. This is where all the fish are. And this is, I mean, it's deep water, right? 70-degree water, over 70-degree water, and they were stacked up, and then I'd find it would look like this for miles. And then here, you can see where the water temp has dropped a little bit more. They've moved up. As they're breaking out of that big school, they're getting hungry, and they're moving up to these flats that aren't far away. And these are the images that you're going to want to look for. You can see on here, you can't see it on the 2D, but on the down scan, that's all shad. And they're coming up and eating the shad. And that's what you want to look for. When you find the shad, they're not far away. They may not be right on top of the shad, but they'll be behind the shad. Wherever the shad came from, that's where they're going to be at. So if you find a bunch of fish like this in 9 feet of water, throw lures at them. I mean, because these are all hybrids right there. Wow. Well, actually, there's probably some white bass in there too, but I mean, it's big fish. Can you see, John?
Yep. No. Good.
And here's another one where you can see him on the side scan. I'm moving really, really slow here so that these images are really stretched out. And this kind of goes back to having the right tools for the job, is having a good fish finder. Because if you can have something with side scan, you don't have to go over top of them and potentially spook them off that. I mean, that's relatively shallow. I think 9 feet, I think it's relatively shallow. Easier to spook the fish if you brought the kayak or a motorboat over them. So I'm a huge proponent of using side scan to find the fish first and then cast to them instead of going over top of them and looking straight down at them. As you can see, it's getting cooler. Now we're approaching what I call the winter time setup. So in the winter, I call winter 40-degree water. You know, everyone else has kind of a different term for it, but that's the beginning. It's just gonna get colder. Once we hit 40, it's just gonna drop until springtime. And hopefully, we're gonna have big floods, which I'm hoping for when it gets that cold, because when it gets
You're a
that
sick
cold,
man.
I am a sick man. The tributaries will even out, you know. So there's a 10-degree difference when the Ohio's 50 and the tributaries are 40. But that water temperature is going to even out. The closer we get to the Ohio getting to 40, the tributaries are going to probably stay right around 40, and then Ohio and the tributaries will be within a couple degrees of each other. That's when the mouth bite evaporates. You know, I mean, it suffers a little bit now because we have a low river, but when it hits 40 degrees, you can always find some at the mouths, but that really hot creek bite mouth is gone, just disappears. And really what you want to look for a good tributary to find them in is a deep tributary. That's, I would probably say, if you can get 10 or more feet of water in the tributary that has flowing water in it, that's what you want to look for. Not that you can't find hybrids in other tributaries that are just drainage ditches, long drainage ditches that are cut back in, but when you have flowing water, that brings more bait fish in, fish have someplace to hide, there's more life in those places. So I pretty much just write off when it gets to be 40 degrees. If it's not a deep trib, I just write it off. I won't even go look at it anymore. I can't tell you how many countless hours searching out cold water places to find these fish, and I've spent a lot of time in these cuts and stuff. Not that I haven't found them there, but to consistently find them. And that's the trick with these fish, right, is to consistently get on these fish, be able to find them, because they're movers. They don't like to hang out in one place. But as it gets colder, they're looking for a tributary that they can hang out in, get their food in, and just kind of chill out and not move around a lot. They stop moving real fast as the water temp drops into the 40 range. And you'll find that if the high was up, all the fish will be pushed into the mouths and the lower parts of the tribs. You don't have to go up to the first riffle. You can stay down by the mouth, but you want to come inside the trib. You don't want to be fishing the ledge on the outside of the trib like you did at 50 and 60 and 70 degree water. You want to move inside the tributaries because all the fish are moving in there. And they're all going to school up together regardless of species. You're going to find carp in there together, you're going to find drum, hybrid, you're going to find them all mixed in these big giant schools. Catfish, I mean everything. It's all going to be in one spot, they're all going to be hanging out. They're not going to be schooling by species like they did when it was warmer. When it's warmer, they school by species. You'll find whites in one area, you'll find hybrids in another, you'll find the carp in somewhere else. But when it gets this cool, they're all hanging out together. I don't really know why they do that. I've asked a couple biologists, and no one ever said that this is the reason. It's like it's cold. That's the answer I've gotten from all the biologists. It's cold. They're just hanging out together. And it's like they're not moving a lot, so they're not fighting with each other. You know. But when you find that, it can be frustrating, right? Because 40-degree water, the drum bite, you know, like crazy. They'll bite like crazy, which I don't catch them any other time of year until it's like 40 degrees, right? And then it's all of a sudden like carp and drum. You want to keep fishing those schools because there is a hybrid in there. They're just mixed in. You just got to work through those other fish, you know. And you'll catch them like biting, like carp literally coming after and chasing down your bait and biting it. I don't know why, because I'm assuming that they're starving to death and there's nothing else for them to eat, and they just see something that looks wounded, and it's easy prey. But fish those schools, and the more you fish those schools, the more chances you're going to have to catch a good hybrid. Because this is the time of year where it starts getting harder to catch the good hybrids. Because now they're not schooling up together, now they're schooling up with other fish. So you can't just target a school of hybrids or a school of white bass. And they have to target these multi-species schools. And what I tend to look for is temperature differences again. If I can find a sunny bank that's even 2 degrees difference when it's below 40-degree water temp, man, I check it out. If I see a sloping bank that's real gentle sloping down, and the sun's beating on it, like a south-facing bank or something, definitely roll over it. And use your fish finder, use your side scan, sweep it and see if the fish are there. Because if they're there, all you gotta do is start running stuff past them, and you're gonna get bit. Now, whether it's a carp, a drum, or a hybrid, you just have to keep working through them. And again, my favorite baits is just a 1/4 ounce lipless, super small swim baits and blade baits. Because if I find them real deep and they're hunkering down at the bottom, at cold water, you can't beat a blade bait. I mean, that's cold, you know, if they're on the bottom and really deep. So one of the ways I target these fish, so what I mean by not at the mouth. So here is an example of a deep tributary off the Ohio River. Water's coming down past here. I found a big school of them right here, behind this obvious current break, right? And this is on an outlet, but you can't see this is on the outside of the bend of the river. All those fish move down and will be up in here, where when it's 50 and 60 degree water, you'll be fishing here. As it gets colder and colder, you'll be fishing more back in the trib, back in these deeper sections, off to these sides, like you might find wood. They'll start acting like largemouth almost. They'll start going into the wood and sitting right next to the wood. And again, one of the things to use is anything that you can get in there without standing. I mean, a small swim bait that you rig it up weedless, great way to go. Great way to go. Here's my 2 favorite small swim baits right there. Both are cheap. Both are incredibly effective. This is a Bass Pro Squirm and Shad, and I forget what this is called. It's like a walleye bait. That's 3 inches. They say this is 3 inches. It's actually 2 3/4. And I just run that on a little 1/4 ounce jig head. And I like to get my own jig heads made, because the ones you buy that are 1/4 ounce at Bass Pro with those brass hooks, they suck. Those brass hooks break. The hybrids will chew on them. You catch a big hybrid, you'll see they'll actually chew on the bait, and if it breaks that hook, you're done, right? He's gone. So I get these custom little 1/4 ounce jig heads made, and I get them with mustad hooks in them. And they're still the same exact size, but the hook quality is way higher. And it allows me to get more fish, and they're sharper. Man, you just land more, way more fish. And how I like to use these baits when I find those big schools is if I'm having a hard time getting the bait from casting on them, like I'll sit on the edge of the school and I'll cast up into them and slow roll it out. If I can't get it that way, I do what I call like a finesse troll, where I let it out the line at like 50 yards. Really, really long, 1/4 ounce jig head with this bait, not this guy. When I'm just casting, I'll throw this one, right? But when I'm doing that long finesse troll, this is the guy. And all my success on the hard days this past 3 years has been doing a finesse troll. I just stumbled across it 4 or 5 years ago, and it took me 2 or 3 years to kind of get my head wrapped around what was going on. And so those hybrids are hanging out in the schools, and they're just looking for an easy meal. They don't want to bust a big shad. They don't want to go chase something down. So when I do this, what I call finesse troll, really, really slow, and that bait's way behind my kayak, so my kayak's way past the fish, so I'm not disturbing them at all. And there's this really slow swim bait coming along, and that swim bait has less tail action. If you look at the tail, see how small that tail boot is on it? That thing wobbles real slow, like that. And it just looks like a wounded shad to them. Easy meal, small, they can just come up and most of those bites, those are not those ram hard hitting bites that you get in the 50 and 60 degree water. It's like they just load up on them. It's just like all of a sudden you got weight, you just set the hook, and then once they're hooked, they know they're hooked, and then they're running, pulling drag, and screaming at you. And again, that's another presentation you don't see a lot of guys do, because for one, you can't do it out of a motorboat. You know, you can't go that slow, and you'll disturb the fish going that close to them like you have to get them to bite doing that troll. So that's one of the best ways as kayak anglers we can use. We're using stealth. We're using small baits to encourage these fish to come out and bite out those groups of fish. And again, it's because it's got a wobble to it.
What size line do you
used on something like that?
12.
12
or 10. You know, once it starts getting cold, I'll switch over to mono, and I'll go to 10-pound line when it gets real cold. So at 40 degrees, I'll still use 12-pound line, but as it gets colder, I'll switch over to mono, and then I'll drop down to 10 when it gets real cold. Of course, I got my drag set accordingly, right? Because you hook a 20-inch fish or bigger, and he takes off that other direction, 10-pound line's not gonna make it. But if you got a drag set right, it's not a big deal. Because all you're gonna hear is "Wah!" and then you're gonna know there's a big fish on it.
Right.
And you can start fighting them. So here we are, and when I say winter conditions, I mean I'm literally winter conditions. This is a day that was, I don't want to say it was like a great day, but we caught fish, you know. And this is when the ice flow had just broken up, it was coming out, and we actually had to get behind the ice flow to fish, and we were following the ice flow as it was coming out. And we found these big schools. What this is the woods, and they're flooded just like a foot of water, and then it comes out and then it drops down, and they were sitting right on that transition, and there was a big school in there.
Danger ride.
Danger ride. This is why it's really important to have a dry suit on, have the buddy system, all the safety stuff that we talked about earlier is incredibly important because these are dangerous conditions. There's no
And your
lie.
Crocs. You gotta
Waterproof.
have your Crocs on.
That's right. You gotta have your Crocs on. You got Crocs, you're just not fishing. So here's 34-degree water. This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. These are all fish on the side scan. Here's the 2D and the down scan. Those are all fish. Finesse troll was the only way I was able to catch any fish out of that group. And this picture corresponds with this picture. It's the same guy.
Wow.
So was that a tributary or the river?
Tributary. This is
Oh,
inside the
tributary.
tributary. At this time of year, when the water temps are like that, I won't even fish the Ohio River. I'll only fish. I'm not tributary mouths, but down towards the mouth. And where you find them exactly, it's going to change day to day, week to week, because they kind of meander around down there, looking for a spot that they can just hang out and kind of wait out the winter and eat slowly. They're not looking for a lot of food. I'm not looking for shad this time of year. You know, I'm not looking for schools of shad. All I'm looking for is this. You know, that's all I'm looking for. Water temp, 31.3.
Holy crap.
So we're talking right at freezing, right? These are all fish. Again. All right. You can't see them super good here, but these are the fish on the side scan. This is my whole unit right there. It's my 5, so the picture's not as good. And here we go. Here's another look at them at 37 degrees. You know, still really super cold water. And again, the first thing I'm going to do when I find these things is I'm going to throw a lipless crankbait in there, and I'm going to throw it out. I'm going to let it hit the bottom. I'm going to give it a slow rise. Let it drop down again. Reel up. Slow rise. Let it drop again. Reel up. And then just over and over, just slowly bringing that lure like this through it, real slow. If that doesn't work, then I move to throwing the small skinny swim bait on a 1/4 ounce, and I'll swim it above them, through them, and then below them. And if that doesn't work, then I switch over to a long line finesse, and I use the squirming shad, 1/4 ounce again. Super long line as I can possibly get, and I just try to run it past them and over top of them. Real slow, mile an hour, mile and a half. No more than a mile and a half an hour. And really that's it, guys. That's my part of the presentation. What questions do you guys have about it?
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
What's the scroll rate you're using on your fish finder?
Well, it changes throughout the year, right? So at 37 degrees, when I'm moving 0.2 miles an hour, I have it set at the lowest setting. That's why this looks so good.
Right.
Because these fish aren't moving really, they're barely moving, and I'm barely moving, but I got it set at the slowest ping rate possible on there. And that's actually a big part of, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's actually a big part of that is your fish finder settings to be able to see these fish and be able to move that slow and have images on there. So you really want to learn how to use your fish finder, and whether you have a hummingbird, a Lowrance, or Ray Marine, you want to turn down that ping rate or the refresh rate, whatever that particular manufacturer calls it.
I was gonna say with the lipless, are you using ones with rattle or without or both?
Both. I find sometimes that when the bite's harder, they want no rattle in it. I do switch out the hooks. Brand new hooks, I take them off and I throw them away. The hooks that come on them are junk. As far as fishing for hybrids, because you're fishing a very, very small bait, you know, a 1/4 ounce. So the hooks aren't real big, you know. I'm a Mustad fan, but in no means is that the only hook to use. You know, I use the Mustad triple shot on there, I think is what it's called. Triple grip, that's what it is. Triple grip on there, and the hook is just if you get a number 6 hook, it's just a tiny bit bigger and stouter, but it doesn't affect the movement of the bait at all. So you can really
I guess 2 questions. One, when the water gets that cold, are you switching your line, or are you still? But what kind of line do you like to use in really super cold water? And then, have you found any tricks to keep your line guides from freezing?
So I switch a 10-pound mono when it gets this cold. You know, you can't use braid. Braid's my favorite to use, but it's freezing temperatures. I mean, if the water's 37, 31, 35, the air temp's probably 20 degrees at best. So I switch over to mono for that. And what I use to keep my guides from freezing, the best thing I found is get spray wax for cars. I've used chapstick, I've used all these other things, and the spray wax for cars is super easy to put on, it's not messy. I bring them in my house, my rods warm up, and I just go, and I'm done. And I'm ready to go for the next trip. That's good for about 4 casts. it doesn't get any better, man. I mean, that's just it. It just doesn't get any better than that. You know, it's a tough time of the year to fish. There's no doubt. When you're fishing in these conditions, your biggest enemy is the cold. I mean, for your safety, for one. For 2, you're battling your guides freezing up, and you know you can't dip your rod tip in the water when it's 37 degrees and pull it out and have it melted off. Like, you know, today, if you went fishing this morning, you could do that, right? You can dip your rod in the 50-degree water, it'll be 20 degrees out, and it'll be freed up again. You can't do it in there. So using that gets you a little bit longer fishing time by spraying the car wax on there. You know, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. I use the cheapest stuff I can find. You know, make sure I don't get it on my lures. You know, right? And I do use line conditioner that time of year too. I think it helps keep your line from fraying as much with the ice.
What are you doing to keep your hands warm?
You know, I try my best to keep my hands warm, but you know, I actually have frostbite in both my hands from fishing out in the wintertime. You know, I use 2 different style gloves. I use a cheap fleece, no finger glove, right? For you know, whenever that doesn't work for me anymore, I switch over to these Glacier. I think they're called Glacier Bay gloves.
Okay.
They're like a neoprene glove. Bass Pro sells them.
Yeah.
Man, it is like I don't know what it is. It's the only piece of neoprene I'll use for any of my gear. I won't use neoprene waders or socks, but those gloves will keep my hands warm. And the neat thing is they'll have cutouts, so you can pull up the fingers and your 2 fingers here, so you can still cast and stuff, and your thumb too. And when you get real cold, you pull them back down, and get your fingers warm again.
Yeah.
It's just it's really uncomfortable fishing this time of year.
It is, because if you're trying to mess around with your gear and your fingers are numb, it makes it really tough.
I've spent 15 to 20 minutes tying a lure on. You're sitting there like, just, you know, you're shaking, you can't feel the line, you're trying to hold the lure, you're trying to tie this little knot, you know. But all that said, as soon as you hook a big fish, you're warm. You know, I'm not thinking about my fingers, I'm not thinking about my toes, I'm not thinking about how hungry I am. You hook a big fish and I'm just that's
Gotcha.
warms you right up. And days like, you know, when you find markings like this in those tributaries, that can be a good day. You can have really good days in the middle of winter time. You know, surprisingly good days.
How many layers you have under your dry suit? Depends on, say, 20 degrees out. Yeah.
20 degrees out. I'm glad you specified that, because it obviously varies. So I'll have a layer of thermal weight underwear on, then I'll have regular pants on, and then I'll have a long sleeve thin shirt on, and I'll have a fleece shirt on, and I'll have fleece pants on, I'll have a bigger fleece top on, and then I also have a fleece vest on that I wear as well. And I'll still put stuff over my
Your outer
dry
layer?
suit. Yeah.
What's your outer layer?
For my dry suit?
Gore-Tex something or
Yeah, I use a dry suit, the NRS.
the
Yeah, I use a two-piece. I use the waders, and then I have the dry top on. But, you know, you don't have to use their particular system, you know, but you definitely want a dry top of some
Yeah.
sort. And I highly recommend going out with a buddy in these conditions, because even if you have the world's best dry suit, you fall in and the water's 37 degrees and the air temp's 20, you're gonna
game over.
yeah, you're gonna be having a hard time getting back in your kayak. Obviously, I live in fear of the water in the wintertime. People think you're like, oh, you're not scared of the water now. I'm all winter long, I'm in fear of the water. You know, I don't step in it. I don't stand in my kayak. I don't play around. I don't joke with my friends and bump their kayak around the water, which I will do in the summertime, right? You know, I will bump your kayak in the summertime. I will splash water on you, but I have zero joking around when it's that cold. It's serious business. Any other questions?
Do you really enjoy it in the winter time?
Well,
I don't know, to me it seems like, you know, you're there to have fun. I mean, you've caught enough fish. You still that excited when it's 10 degrees out and you're out there?
I'm
I'd
more
rather-
excited.
Here's a picture of him.
Yeah, there you
Look
go.
at
Look
this
at that. I mean, you know, I'm more excited in the wintertime when I catch fish, you know. Even though I've caught a lot of fish, I'm an addict to fishing.
All right.
I'm a literal addict. I'm a junkie. If I can't fish, there's, you know, no one's gonna be happy around me, right? You know, my wife actually encourages me to go fishing in the wintertime because
Really?
she gets
Life
tired
insurance.
of it. You know, and do I enjoy being cold and sitting out there on a bad day? Not so much, man. But as soon as I get that good bite, I'm better. And this is part of the reason I'm putting the seminar on, is so you can pick a better tributary to fish, so you have a higher chance to catch these fish. I mean, if you look at all these images, we're still talking 15 feet deep, right? So you can't be in a really shallow trail and catch these fish. You know, at least I haven't seen them in 2 feet of water, or 3 feet of water when it's this cold. You know, I only find them 10 feet or deeper.
So between Marklet and Meldal, how many tributaries would that be?
I don't honestly know the exact number of that. I can tell you that
Yes,
between those two dams, I fished 10. I have found 10 really productive tributaries. I don't fish all those tributaries all the time because some of them are an hour or more away. So I don't fish those all the time. I mean, basically 80% of my time fishing is on the Little Miami. I mean, you know, and then I have 2 other tributaries that are close by that I fish, and then I have 4 more that I'll rotate through if I'm not fishing those that are farther away. And they're downriver. Some of them are on the Indiana side, some are on the Kentucky side.
Those are the small ones too, though.
So you need both licenses.
Yes. Yes.
Is it
Because
past
you won't
the
be in
first
the river.
riffle? I thought, isn't it first riffle?
I will fish. I don't go all the way up to the first riffles.
That's why I think you can have an Ohio license and go up in
Oh, is that
Kentucky
right?
up to first riffle. I think is like
So
where the rule is. So I
Is
think
that the
if you
rule?
just have Indiana, Ohio, or Kentucky,
Yeah, I don't know.
that's what I've heard.
I always heard you couldn't go into the tribs on
You couldn't
Kentucky.
go in. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not entirely clear on that. I mean,
It would be kind of interesting to know, though.
yeah, it would be.
Yeah.
I fish so much in Kentucky and Indiana, other ways I just get the licenses. But that's a really good question. I'll actually try to find that out.
It's first riffle.
You know, you're the second person to tell me that, so there's probably
Yeah.
something to that.
It's first riffle.
There's probably something to that. Yeah, and that can save you some money right there.
Yeah.
Let's say you're fishing right where that cluster is and you just caught a fish. Does that disturb the fish that were in that cluster, or can you go right back 5 minutes later and catch one again? Or do
Yes.
you wait a little bit?
Yes, yes, and yes. So
Okay.
it can disturb them, right?
Mhm.
So let's say you hook into the biggest one in the
Right.
bunch, right? And he is bulldogging you, right?
Yeah.
He's got 10-pound lines, so you can't just pull him out. Well, if he's doing circles down in that group, more than likely those fish will be pushed out of that area, right? If you catch one and get them out of there, you can cast right back in. Most of the time they won't, if they move, they won't move far when it's that cold. Like
Okay.
they'll just move out a little bit
Mhm.
from that area.
Now, I've got a question. If, in the smallmouth world, when we catch one, a lot of times we unhook it, we let it go, it'll run down and narc on us. They'll actually beat the other fish, and the whole school will disappear. Do they do the same thing?
You know, I think they do, but more in warmer water, right? So I'm gonna give you an example. I just got, this year I got my first 2 real true stripes, right? Well, which I believe are true stripes anyway. And that's exactly what happened. The school moved in, I actually saw them on my fish finder, I hook into one, I get them to the boat, and of course I take my pictures with them, I dump them back in that water, and within 5 minutes they rolled.
Wow.
And their shad were everywhere still, right? They're
So-
all over the place. I'm like, what the I didn't, it wasn't like I dropped something in my boat and made a big noise or anything. I think there's something to that. They, you know, they can, I think they can sense. Yeah, they go panic. Run!
Yeah.
Maybe they got abducted by aliens.
Yeah, maybe I did.
I'm telling you, there's something to it, and when you're smallmouth fishing, that they will tell on you.
They
So
spook.
Yeah, I think there's something to it, man, because they, you know, you see them chasing them up when the fish are coming up with the smallmouth especially. You see them chasing each other on the way up.
Yeah.
You know, well, you let that fish go and he's in a panic going down. I think the fish know that, well, he's not going, it's not like he's chasing something up anymore. You know, he's running down away from something. There's
I
definitely,
saw that guy, you've heard of Chad Hoover, right?
oh, yeah.
I saw him on one of his YouTube things, he was catching he was down one of his southern tributaries somewhere, and he caught, it was a springtime, and he caught the little male bass that was on the nest.
Yeah, I saw that.
He put that in his kayak in a live well, didn't release it because he was going after the female.
Yeah.
He says he's found out if you release that fish, you won't be able to catch the female for whatever reason. And he took that fish and he moved it somewhere else, went back, caught the female, caught the big one.
Yep. There's something totally to that. So those females really don't go far from the nests, right? When you come up to those nests, you're gonna see 1 or 2 fish on them, usually a great big one or the buck, right? When the buck's on there, the little guy, you can get him off of there, the female isn't far away, and he'll come up and guard the nest. I mean, there's not really river fishing forever. Definitely. Yeah.
Hey, here's an answer to the river agreement regulations. Lawrence County west of South Point, Scioto, Adams, Brown, Claremont, Hamilton counties, Ohio, and Kentucky will honor the other states' fishing license along their common borders on the main stem and from the banks of the Ohio River, excluding embayments and tributaries.
So you do need,
So
I'm
you're
assuming
doing
from that, you
tributary,
do
then
need.
Yeah,
That's
both
what I always
Kentucky
heard.
and Ohio will honor their license if you're in the river away from the banks.
Which is good. So if you're just fishing the main river, you're in that time of year where it's 70, 50, 60 degrees, you don't need a separate license. But if you're gonna go way back in the tributaries, like if you're gonna fish gunpowder, or you're gonna fish, I can't remember all the Kentucky names, but there's like 4 tributaries that are deep right in a row. Those are all players. There are players all winter long. You can go down there and catch them. You gotta find them, right? You gotta get them to
The
find them.
Kentucky River, you ever do the Kentucky River?
I have not.
No?
I have not.
Where it comes out down at,
It looks juicy.
Carroll.
Yeah, it looks so juicy. I was just looking at that, when I was doing this, I was looking at the map on that. I sat there and stared at the map for about an hour, just looking at the whole section, man. It is a juicy little area, but I have not, man. Most of my experience is in our pool. I have fished other pools a little bit, but 99% of my experience is in our pool. So, honestly, between Meldal and Markland,
That's a long area.
yeah, that's a huge
That's a
area.
Well,
And by no means have I hit every single tributary, not even close, 'cause there's so many of them. I actually just recently went on a boat ride in the Ohio River with my friend, and he took me down to some tributaries I've never been in, and I guarantee you every one of them was a player. Every one of them at low water was 10 to 15 feet deep. They were stuffed full of shad when we were there. We were there in just under 80-degree water, and they were stuffed full of shad. I guarantee you all those are players. Problem is, there's no access for kayaks.
Yeah.
There's no launches, and that's the problem for us.
How do you get your boat in and out? Are you wheeling it down off your?
Yeah. A lot of times I'm wheeling it down, or, I mean,
So you get your wheels in the back of the boat with you on the trip?
yeah.
Always.
Or
Yeah,
sometimes
what
I'll
else?
leave them in the woods.
Yeah.
You know, that's why you see me so muddy. Is
Yeah.
because I'm dragging my kayak, I'm coming down to these floodplain areas that are going up and down.
Just muscling up and down getting it in there. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, there's some places that will have ramps, you know, but you gotta do some research and you gotta find them. There's not as many. So obviously the creeks that don't have ramps don't get as much pressure. You know, because a lot of guys in motorboats, excluding a few people, right, are shut down for the winter. They're not fishing. You know? So if you can get to these tribs that aren't right by a boat ramp, your chances go up. And one thing to keep in mind is you really want to keep persistent with these guys, because, you know, it looks like I catch a lot of fish, but I have plenty of one fish days. Plenty of them, you know. And that's just how it goes for these fish, right? Every day is not the jackpot. You're not gonna crack them 20 fish in one day every trip out.
Now,
If I hear anyone say that to
switch?
me,
Will you switch and go to another species then? I mean, do you get, no? You just
No.
still stay with it?
I just grind it out, man.
Hardcore.
I am just into those fish, man.
Yeah.
I look forward to this all year, man. After doing tournaments and fishing for black bass all year long, and man, I put over 20,000 miles in my car this year driving to tournaments. You know,
Yeah.
I'm ready. You know, I'm ready to switch away from those and switch over to catching stripes. And when I make that switch, I am like, my motivation's renewed. I'm blinders, man. I don't even watch TV anymore. My wife turns the TV on, and I'm map studying the whole time, man. I'm looking up reports. I start texting my friends that fish different parts of the river. I don't even watch TV anymore. My friends make fun of me. They're like, "You text me like 16 times. I'm trying to watch the show with my wife." And I'm like, "Well, my wife's watching the same show." You know, I mean.
Aren't you looking at your stuff?
Yeah, man. I'm just getting psyched for the next day, you know.
What kind of fisherman are you?
Exactly.
Oh my God, that's funny.
You got it bad.
Yeah.
And another thing, you know, to keep in mind too, is the lures I showed you, I dumbed it down, right? These are my most productive lures. There are other ones that catch these fish, right? Like A-rigs, you know, I mean, the list goes on. There's millions of different ones out there you can use to catch these fish, but you want to imitate shad, you want to imitate their bait, you know, that's the real deal. I mean, and they get incredibly fussy on size, right? When the water gets cold, they'll get incredibly fussy about size. Like, if you see shad that are like this big, you better be throwing something that big. You know, if they're this big, you better be throwing something that big. They get really, really fussy about size. And I don't know why. I don't really know why they get so fussy between a half-inch difference, because you're catching a 25-inch hybrid. Why does it care? Right? I'm in the mouth, I can put my fist in its mouth. Why does it care if it's a 3-inch fish or a 4-inch fish? But they do.
How do you figure out what size that they're eating?
You gotta throw it. You gotta throw it. And honestly, when the water gets that cold, I start small and then work my way up. Because more than likely, they're gonna be biting super small stuff when the water's really cold. The warmer the water, the bigger the bait I'll throw. So in 70-degree water, I'll throw big giant swim baits, big lipless crankbaits. That's really about all I throw for them. You know, if the water gets real blown out, I'll throw the Texas rig worm down on them. You know, like I said, I don't know if you were here for that part, but when the water's blowing up, when the water's blown out and the river and it's blowing up on the banks, you kind of see it splitting and bubbling up. You want to fish those areas with a Texas rig worm a lot of times, because the main area will be so littered with trees and leaves and sticks that the fish won't be out there. They'll be glued up against the structure, kind of away from that stuff. I mean, you can still get them, but that's how you get them.
And you're staying with your white color?
Yeah, white or the deal color. You know, the deal's white on one side and green on the other. I actually find that one works the best at 50 degrees, but then as it gets colder, going to all white works better. And then I slowly trim it down too as it gets colder and colder. I'll make it smaller and smaller and smaller. I'll end up putting like a 1/0 hook in there instead of a 3/0 to get that size really small.
See, like you said though, you know, it's funny because you would think if that's hitting the bank like that and it's churning up the mud and all that stuff, that would be a muddy mess. White's usually not the color you want to go to.
I know.
Yeah,
I know. Isn't that
that's just
weird?
yeah.
Isn't that weird? And
Yeah.
how I stumbled on that was when it was still warm out 4 years ago. I was just like, well, I'm not catching hybrids. I'm gonna go catch some spots. And then I'm like, oh, shit, 20-incher. Go down the bank a little bit more, just letting that thing down the bank, the current pulling it, me not doing anything. Boom, 20-incher. It's not all the time, but when the water's up and my other baits aren't working, and the other spots, they're just not like where I think they should be, you know, like where you normally,
Right.
I start doing that, man. It's like almost guaranteed if they're not biting in the middle, they're biting there on the edges. Almost guaranteed.
What rod setup are you using
For which bait?
fishing, quarter ounce?
The quarter ounce swim baits?
Yeah.
I use medium, light, fast action, 7-foot long St. Croix Legend. I mean, that's the exact one I use. You know, you want to be able to throw the lure. It's really underpowered rod for fishing these fish,
Yeah.
but you're the right power for the bait. You know, and if you use cheaper rods and you're using lightweight rods to fish hybrids, you're going to go through a lot of rods. You're going to break rods. I've broken more than a few rods that way. They just the hybrids will just wear them out. Any other questions?
I want to hear about this striper you caught the other day. You said it was jumping.
That is the weirdest thing I have seen stripe, anything with stripes on it do. I have no idea why that fish was jumping. When I hooked him, he was literally like, he was in 10 feet of water. He ran down, I don't know how deep, but he ran off the ledge and went straight down. I'm like, oh man, I'm just hanging on. He's ripping a line out. And then all of a sudden my line goes dead. And I'm like, reeling in, I'm like, wow, shit, I just lost him. And he just came straight out of the water. And then did it again. I mean, it was like a sailfish. It was yeah, exactly. It was like a smallmouth type thing, but it was almost 30 inches, 29 inches.
Hooked
Man.
funny? Was it hooked funny?
No.
No.
That's the only time I've ever seen that happen. I reached out to Jeff Little. I reached out to.
Kind of thrash your head on the surface, but never come completely out.
Exactly. I've never seen him jump. This one, I was like. I was in awe. I didn't even know what to do. When he first came out of the water, I was like, what do I even have hooked? Because all I saw was the splash. You know, he just comes out and he goes back down. I saw something white, and I'm like, that was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. You know, a striper do. And I'm like, so I was thinking that it was either hooked funny, or I was thinking maybe it was a carp that I had hooked funny, or just something weird. But no, he was just a weird striper.
That's weird.
That was the only time I've ever seen it. Everyone I've talked to is like, no, that's really weird.
Yeah.
You know. Have you? I mean,
I've
you
never
fished
found,
them.
thrash on the surface, but never come completely out of the water.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, and it was breaching the water. It was completely out. Like just like a smallmouth, like John was saying.
I can see it.
It was weird. It was weird. I don't really want to see it again because I mean, you're just like,
Trying to get away. Trying to get away.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what he was doing. He was trying to get away. And when I got him in the boat, he was just sitting there chewing on the troubles.
Really?
He was pissed, man. He was like, I mean, I think he was trying to break them. I don't know why they chewed on him.
What kind of rod did you have on that one?
That was my glass rod, medium powered, mono tip. You know, and that was lipless crankbait that he had. I mean, he choked it too. I mean, it was like right down in his mouth.
Doing this all in bait casters?
No. So the quarter ounce swim baits are all on regular stuff, regular tackle.
Okay.
You know, but my lipless crankbait is definitely a bait caster.
Okay.
Which becomes a problem at one time.
Yeah.
Right. Micro eyelets going out.
Yeah, I just wondering how you're doing it, man.
Yeah.
What about the TRD? When you throw the TRD
On
stuff.
TRD, I'm throwing that on a heavy or a
Is that right?
medium
Like my
heavy
Calcuttas and
with
stuff, I
a
don't even
fast
like
tip.
those fish those in the
The wet
winter
line
because they're
at
so
that
cold
point.
to hold on
Oh,
to
I
and
think
stuff, so.
yeah.
30-pound line, and I'll run a leader on there,
Okay.
and the leader will be 17-pound fluoro.
Okay. And you're as a quarter ounce shroom head or something like that, or?
Quarter-ounce tungsten. I'll Texas rig it.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
You know, so it's weedless essentially. You know.
Okay.
You pegging it?
No, no, I'm not a big pegging guy unless I'm pitching and flipping stuff. You know, because I like the separation. So what happens is, as that bait's ticking down, the bait and the weight are separating. So that bait is actually going like this. up
Like
in
a
the
Carolina
water.
almost, yeah.
Exactly. It turns into almost like a Carolina rig. You
So
know?
it's not floating anymore. It's just kind of laying down and dragging.
Yeah, well, I'm using Lastec stuff, so it is floating,
Oh, yeah,
and I do
okay.
use a light wire hook, so it does float. So like if I throw it, I wish I would have bought one now. If I threw one in the water, it'd surface float.
Yeah.
Put any stoppers on? You just let it, whatever goes.
I just let it go
Too, when they
wild, man.
Pick it up, that weight stays on the bottom sometimes too, they don't feel that resistance.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a weird bite when you do that. It's not like a largemouth bite, man. It's like, is that a bite? You know, you just don't even think about it. I just set the hook. Anytime I think it's a bite, you know, half the time it's not, right? Like this, there's nothing there.
Hook sets are free.
That's right. Hook sets are free, fish are not.
Is that a 3-inch? You throw the 3-inch size or the bigger or the smaller? TRD?
The big TRD. What is that? I think that's 3 inches.
Like 4 inch or something like that. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe it's 4 inches. I've never measured it honestly.
Yeah.
You're right. It's probably 4 inches. You know, but as it gets colder, I'll keep cutting it down and make it
Gotcha.
smaller and smaller. But that's a high water situation only. Like, you go out in the river right now, I won't throw it.
Yeah.
You know.
High water. What was the temperature? Water temperature you said that you?
All the way down to about 40 degrees.
Okay, so
45.
if the water's up, you'll try it if they're not in their normal spots or something like that.
Exactly. It's like one of those fallback ones. Like, you go out there and let's say you had too much rain a day or two before, and there's a bunch of crap in the river flowing down. That's when I'll throw that. You know, it's never my first thing to throw. It's always it's always like my third, fourth thing. I'm laying back on. But you don't see a lot of people use it, and that's why I'm presenting it to you guys, because I have found it to be super effective for me in high water situations.
Catch a lot of largemouth on it. I've never really caught a hybrid with it.
Me neither, man. I mean, that particular bait's made me a lot of money in tournaments.
Yeah.
In that particular setup, but in hybrids, it works too, man. And like I said, I discovered it because the hybrids weren't biting. And it was accidental.
Yeah.
You know, and that was 4 years ago. You know, it took me a couple years to kind of figure it out because I kept throwing it. And I'm like, well, I'm not getting them, or I'm just picking up spots, and then I'm kind of put it together. Well, it has to be going on water, and that's the setup that you're looking for.
What color TRD?
The white one or the deal color, which is white and green. Any more questions?
I was going to recommend on the insulation that you guys wear, look for Primaloft insulation. It's really durable. It's good when it gets wet. You know, keep you warm.
Yeah, synthetics only, all winter long. That's a good point. You know, if anything I'm wearing, there's no cotton. I won't wear a cotton t-shirt or anything like that.
Smart wool socks. They work.
Well, guys, there's no more questions. That's it, man. Thanks for showing up. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, buddy. Good job.